G'day, welcome to True Blue History. I'm Adam Blum. Today's special guest is Carly Box. Carly was in the Army for 11 years and was the first female to enlist into a combat corps and was an operator of an unmanned air vehicle. That's right, is it, Carly? That's correct. She deployed to Afghanistan in 2009 as a ScanEagle operator, spending 1,000 hours on the platform, and she had deployed again in 2013 as a Shadow Mission Commander. Today she runs the Barracks Gym with her partner, Michael, and she has joined us today to talk about her life in the ADF and also her life after service. Hi, Carly. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Wow, what an intro, hey? You have stalked... Did I give you that info? Or you stalked me out?
I've stalked you,
That's awesome. I love it. No, yes. Thank you for having me. I'm honoured to have been asked, so thank you. I think we've actually been trying to do this for about a year, so we've finally made it work.
We have, yeah. No, it's been... last time I was coming up to see you, it flooded. Your gym, unfortunately, got flooded, so it's been a long time in the process, but it's an honour and a privilege to have you on. So... before you joined the Army, tell me about Carly Box growing up.
Where do I start? So I was born in 1983, turned 39 this year. Brisbane born and bred and still reside in Brisbane today for now. Pretty standard nuclear family, like mum, dad, brother, sister, a couple of dogs here and there. Just had a really nice upbringing with my fam. Went through school, went through high school. I was always a musician at school, played the flute, which I'm very proud of. My fiancé likes to give me a lot of shit about it though. But that was always going to be my career path. I was very, very good at music, and I wanted to go down that path some way, somehow. Now, when it comes to getting to choose like what uni degree you might want to do. For me, it was like, I want to do a Bachelor of Music. I want to go to the Conservatorium, which is through Griffith Uni. But you have to audition. And so rather than put all your eggs in one basket, there's a lot of like UQ, QUT, they're all the Brisbane unis, will all take musicians to do Bachelor of Music. So I set out to do my auditions for all of those and didn't get in anywhere. And I was shattered and had no plan B. And it wasn't because I wasn't good. I was just in a very, very exceptional pool of musicians. So I still ranked highly and I still scored highly. I just was not the best that was there, which is unfortunate. So, I then kind of had to redirect my life a little bit, and I just had no idea what to do. I was so hell-bent on, well, it's going to be music, that's what I'm going to do. And without a plan B, I just didn't really know what I was going to do. And back then it was OP scores, and I didn't get the greatest OP score because all my energy and effort went into music. So I wasn't really focused on, I didn't even do a science, and I, didn't score well in maths and English. Like I did okay, but it was like, because all my effort went into music, my grades fell down in other places. Not the greatest OP, but all that meant was that things that I was looking at for a plan B, I just didn't score well enough to get into. And so all of a sudden I'm like, I'll go be a primary school teacher. Didn't get a good enough OP for that. I'll go do this. And then it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do now. So I did what everybody does, and I went and did a Bachelor of Arts, bunch of random subjects. Still managed to throw in some music subjects in there. Anyway, ended up totally changing direction and went and did a Bachelor of Human Services, which is so redundant now, and I don't use it, and I'm still paying it off, and I will take that to the grave. Every year my accountant's like, do you want to pay this? I'm like, nah, just leave it there. I'll just keep paying it off. And I guess I only went to uni back then because I was made to believe through the schooling system then that that's what you had to do. You either went off and you got a trade or you went to uni, and there was nothing in between. Had I have known then what I know now without jumping too far ahead, I would have either taken a gap year and travelled, or I would have joined the military in the band. But not one person, no school guidance counsellor or anything said to me, hey, have you ever thought about military bands? There were a couple of boys that went off to like army to do infantry and stuff like that, but no one ever said, there's like 3 services you could potentially go into as a musician, audition, and we'll go down that path. I'd probably be like, I don't know, the RSM of the band by now, just with the amount of time that's lapsed. But anyway, that's a story, that is a chapter that's closed, and that's not where my life took me. So anyway, I went to uni, got got a job in that field and then didn't really love it. Just didn't really love anything. I was just like, what am I even doing? And I was in an internet cafe one day and I decided that, I was like just checking my Hotmail and the ad popped up for the Army Reserves. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. Gave it a crack and applied. Back then you used to get like letters in the mail saying, hey, you need to go to this, it was called a Joe's Day back then. It's a U session now. But and so like before I knew it, I was in the Army Reserves. But prior to that, it was never on my radar at all. No one in my family has a military history. I have great uncles who fought in the World Wars, but, and through my pa, so they're his brothers, I know a lot about, their history. But, it wasn't sort of like, oh, that's what I want to do with my life, because it didn't actually sound very nice, the history that I had learnt from them. But, yeah, like I was, as a kid and as a teenager, I like loved swimming, loved running. I was always, in cross-country team, did nippers, surf club, was really heavily involved in surf club. Still wish I was now, but, kids. So where my life is now is so polar opposite from where I saw it going back then. But, I guess that's the fun of it. And you and I have just spoken prior to now extensively about that. But, so I guess that's kind of the rundown of me pre-Army.
So what was your family's reaction like when you said, hey, guess what? I've enlisted in the Army Reserve. Were they shocked?
Yeah. I don't think they believed me at first. So my dad unfortunately passed away in 2002. So it was just my mum, brother and sister by this stage. So I enlisted in 2006. And I think because I had just been doing stuff prior to then, I went to uni, I, got a job, was working in that job. Like I was living down the coast on the Gold Coast. So I was just sort of like doing stuff down there, doing surf club. And then I think, for me to one day say, hey, I'm enlisting in the Army. The enlistment ceremony is in the city on this day. Do you want to come? They're a bit like, what? Why? Hang on. And I was like, oh, it's all right. It's only Army Reserves. I'm not going anywhere. It's fine. So I think whilst they were a bit shocked, they were just like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. But I think that the concern came from, are you going to join full time and have to go away? And, Afghanistan and Iraq was just starting to ramp up then as well. And when I had said, oh, no, I'm only going reserves, there was a bit of relief, which, then flipped on its head a year and a half later when I decided to go full time. But yeah, so I guess a bit shocked because it was never really on the radar. And I think too, I don't want to name names, but some people in my family, because they might listen, maybe doubted me a lot and were like, what, you can't join the Army. What are you thinking?
Did you ever doubt yourself?
Yeah, not at that point. Because I passed my PFA and I didn't really have any issues there. But it was more like once I got to Kapooka, there was a few times where I was like, oh, geez, what have I done here? But no, I don't feel like I doubted myself, but I also use their doubt as fuel to my fire. Which is, when I mentor a lot of people nowadays, I'm like, anyone in your corner who's doubting you use that as fuel to your fire and you just, fucking watch me. Like, I'm going to do this. So if they had have outwardly doubted me, that, that would have just been fuel to my fire.
I think you've just touched on a very key point there, is that I say it too, that people say to me, like, when I started this podcast, Carly, my work colleagues where I was, they laughed at me and said, you think you're going to be a podcast host? And I went, and my whole life, as I've told you off air, has been one of just resilience. If I've been given a barrier, I just go, well, I find a way around the barrier. And I'll say that to the listeners. It's great fuel to the fire to be told you can't do something. And then the proof's in the pudding now, with this being the 53rd episode. So, I'm a big F you to the, and people can't see it, but Carly can see what I'm doing, and it's a big F you to the people that ever say you can't do something, because use it as fuel to make you want to prove them wrong, and you did that. So
anyone can do anything, I probably can't go and lift that truck up on my own, but I could go and become really, really strong and go in a strongman competition if I wanted to, or if I decide I want to go and climb Everest, I can do that. I was talking to my friend Chris last night about some crazy potential expedition that he was doing that I jokingly said, could I come to, but I secretly really do want to come to, and that would take a lot of training and tenacity to get there. And I just think anyone can do anything. And, when it comes to podcasting for yourself, and I said this to you earlier, when I started my podcast, I literally Googled how to start a podcast. Like, there's so much information out there, yeah.
And it's funny, since starting the podcast, so many people have said, oh, how do you do it? Like, and can I get some tips? I want to start. And I go, all right, well, you do realise that you need to work hard. It's not it's not an easy, like, people just think you hit play, and you know it too, being a podcast host. It is not. There's so much work that goes into it. Yeah, there is. Like, it's not easy, but it's rewarding. Like, sitting across from you having a chat. Like, I love it. I love talking to veterans. I love talking to military historians about our history of the military and your story. Like, it's something that I am passionate about, because I want to tell the future generations of what you've done and what others have done, because I'm a big believer in, without knowing our past, we have no future. So we need to learn from our past to go forward and not make the same mistakes. And, I really believe that, and that's why I do what I do, and I love it. So if anyone can take away is, don't ever let anyone say you're limited by your options. There's always an option out there. So, and you're living proof of that. Like, so for you, for many people, Kapuka's hard and it's a challenge. What did you find most challenging about Kapuka and basic training?
Yeah, so I actually really loved Kapuka. I'm one of those weirdos that was, when people say, oh, it was the worst 3 months of my life, I'm like, it was seriously the best. I loved it. But yeah, I mean, the things that are hard are the things that you might be deficient at, or the weaknesses that you have, or the things that you haven't worked on. So, pack marching was something that I found a little bit challenging, because all my training prior to that had been around running and making sure I was an efficient runner and all that sort of stuff. But I didn't work on, like my core strength and load carriage and being able to handle load carriage, which, in the work I do now, that lesson's been learned, and, I'm able to pay that shitty lesson of mine forward to other people. I struggled a little bit, and this isn't really to do with the training, but just like, I don't know what to call it, like personality management. You're working with it's so tight knit with like 40 people, and then, it gets broken down into your sections. You're in a room with 3 or 4 other people, and you're not necessarily going to like everybody. You're not going to get along with everybody. Not everybody's going to think like you. Not everybody's going to have the same work ethic as you. And so, that is something that I didn't foresee and therefore found difficult at times. But then that becomes a recurring theme throughout your career as well. So I think you just kind of get more and more used to it. Maybe better at it. I don't think I was always that great at it throughout my career. But yeah, you just kind of, that's something that I found challenging. And then I went to Kapuka twice, because I went reserves and then full time. And I went in the heat of summer both times, so December, January. And yeah, like that, I mean, I'm a Queenslander, so the heat is nothing to me, but down there it's a real dry heat. It's completely different to, our humidity up here, and operating in the heat sometimes is challenging. And, I hated the Rat Pack food, and I'm not a fussy eater either, but it was just something about eating food out of a pouch really grossed me out. It was a textual thing. Which is funny, because now, like, as a parent, you expect your kids to eat out of pouches. But anyway, and so I just wouldn't. And I actually got really close at one point to not fainting, but I had no energy. And outfield, they just sat me down under a tree and they just said, look, take your boots off, take your overshirt off, and just sit, and here's a meal and you're going to eat it. And I was like, but they're gross. I don't want to. And they're like, too bad. You just have to, because it's hot. You haven't eaten anything. You cannot live off cheese and crackers, which is funny, because now I feel like I live off cheese and crackers. But yeah, and so, knowing that, not knowing how to correctly fuel my body for the work that needs to be done in spite of the, environmental elements, was something I found a bit challenging. But then once you kind of just have to go suck it up and go, okay, I'm just going to eat it, even though I find it a bit gross, whatever. And after that, I was totally fine. They're like, see, you're fine. You just have to eat, like, whatever. And I can't believe that I had to be sat down and told to eat. But, it's a lesson learned that you just have to. You have to fuel your body for the work that you need to do. And especially when it's really, really hot. Because when it's hot down there, it's like hot as fuck. So you just have to be ready.
believe you, like, I know exactly what you're talking about because we have rat packs in Fire Brigade as well when we go out remote, and I can tell, I agree with you, they are crap. They taste terrible sometimes, and yeah, sometimes you open it up and go, what is this? Like it's I can relate because I've looked and gone, yeah, no, I think I'll just go for the crackers or the Vegemite and Saos. Like that's a better option. So that was mine as well. So yeah, no, I can relate. So what corps did you enlist in reserves before going into full time?
So originally I went in as transport, so to be a driver. And I guess my reason for that was I wanted to do something that was not necessarily active, but I didn't want to be office bound, I guess. So to me, that sort of felt like I'd be able to get out and about and, like interact with people doing lots of other jobs, whether it's like delivering stores or delivering meals or doing whatever I needed to do in that role, that I would still be able to get out and about. So yeah, that's why I chose that.
So what made you transfer to full-time Army, and what was the process hard to change over from reserves to regular?
So I loved it. I got back from Kapuka and I just was like, that was the coolest thing ever. Like, I had so much fun. I made such good friends. I just really loved the lifestyle. I love the routine. I love the regimentality. I don't even know if that's a word, but I've been using that word for a lot of years. I really loved the lifestyle. And I was just working in like a sales office job at the time for a company that I hated, and the boss was a massive narcissist, and he used to tell me I needed to go shopping to buy better clothes because the clothes that I was turning up to work in were not. I got to be careful how I word it. Basically saying that I didn't look nice enough to be going out and selling stuff to people.
I'm guessing sex appeal, maybe? Yeah.
Because I was like, dressing corporate, but not like, in cute, clothes that would make me look more feminine. So, and he's, you need to go out and buy that. And I'm like, well, you pay me fuck all. So my money goes on living, not clothes. And, he once came in and slapped a piece of paper down on my desk with a phone number, and because I grew up with like really bad acne as a teenager and then sort of into my early 20s. And it still haunts me to this day. And he slapped the phone number down. He said, that's the number of my dermatologist. Go and contact them, because if you're going to be putting your face out as the face of my company, I don't want you looking like that. And I was just like young and didn't have any balls and it was like, oh, sure, okay. And I let him make me feel like shit. Like, I didn't stand up for myself. And nowadays, like 20 years later, like, the world is so different, and you would not get away with that in a company, for starters, and you would not get away with that with me.
I was going to say, no, Carly, I know you now.
Yeah, and you will not get away with talking to my daughter like that. So, and you and me were talking a little bit before about uniqueness, and without going into, another tangent on that, it was very much, you don't dress nice enough and your face is ugly and all these things. And every day it was pulling me into his office saying, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that right, even though I was like doing things the way he told me he wanted them done. And so anyway, I got back from Kapuka and I was basically like, fuck this shit. Like, what am I even doing here? Like, I'm, 20 something years old. Like, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. And so I ended up quitting on the spot without anywhere to go. I hadn't even opened up the option to, go full-time Army. I just went, you know what, here's my 4 weeks notice, I'm done. Your company sucks, you suck, like whatever. And the guy's a millionaire, like he's a millionaire, he's a father, he has children, he has daughters, and I'm just like, and you still speak to people like that. Anyway, I won't go on a rampage. But
I was going to ask you, it's just come into my head, and sorry to stop your train of thought.
All right.
Was it empowering for you?
Not at the time. It made me feel like shit at the time. And it made me feel very insecure and made me doubt myself. And I actually believed what he was saying. I was like, oh, okay, maybe he's right. shouldn't actually be out there because I probably should cake the makeup on to, like I believed him. And it's only sort of, many, many years down the track that you kind of go like, who cares? Like if you're good at your job, and that's a really big thing in army is like right person for the job. If you're good at your job, that's all that should matter, And so I quit 4 weeks notice and I just got myself another job working for a recruitment company. And it was then that I said to my chain of command, hey, I want to go full time. Let's start the ball rolling. And the process was not easy, and I still don't think it is easy because it just takes a lot of time and a lot of paperwork because there's a lot of moving parts. So you obviously have to have like medical, psych, all the normal processes to transfer to anything. There has to be a position available for you. They have to line it up with like if you have to go back to Kapooka, IET dates, like it all has to be lined up. And because I had some deficiencies from doing the the reserve recruit course, which is only 5 weeks long at the time, they were like, it's just easier if you go back. And I didn't mind because I loved it. So anyway, I decided I was going to go communications operator in signals, and that was a 2-year wait. And I was like, no, I want to go now. So I had a look around for other jobs and I was going to go EW. And I got into that quite happily, to go into EW. I was literally about to sign on the dotted line, and then my RSM came sort of running down the hall and was like, wait. Chief Defence Force has just signed off on females being allowed into artillery. And the unit I was at was the UAV unit, which was artillery. And he's like, if you go across, you'll be the first. I was like, I don't want to know. Like, no, I'm not smart enough to fly UAV. Like, I'm not doing that. That's crazy. And he's like, go home, sleep on it. That's fine. So anyway, went back to my car, and I knew by the time I got back to the car, I was like, no, I'm just going to do it. Like, who cares? I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I was just like, no, I'm going to do this. And so everything kind of like escalated really fast and the ball started rolling really quick. It still took quite a few months before it actually happened. But yeah, I came back the next day and I'm like, yeah, I'm in, let's do it. Like, I'm all in. Let's go, let's do this. So yeah, signed on the dotted line for that. And then, still took a month or so until I was like full time and, transferring and going back to Kapooka.
So you've just signed on the dotted line and then you go back to Kapooka for the second time. What was different this time to the first time?
Well, I mean, I was full-time now, so it was like, well, this is it. Like, I don't have another job to go back to. I don't have a life to go back to, per se. This is what I do now. Like, I'm in full-time. I went back in to, like, week 1, day 1, and I was really hoping to just kind of lay low, and I didn't really want anyone to know that I was a reservist, so I was kind of hoping I could just sort of, like, cruise through. When you've already been to Kapooka before, going back to week 1, day 1 is so painful because you're expecting people to operate with a sense of urgency, to like, have respect for their hierarchy, to use their manners, like, to do things properly and quickly. And people are still like, walking slow and not going fast up the stairs. And you're like, come on, man, go fast, we'll get in trouble, So that was an adjustment. And straight away, as soon as I got on the bus, there were 2 other girls that were in a similar situation to me. They decided to go full time, and the old sergeant on the bus, he's like, oh, you guys are all really lucky because you've got 3 people sitting right here who are reservists, and, they'll be able to answer all your questions because they've already been to Kapooka before. And so I was like, you just outed us, man. Like, we didn't really want anyone to know. But anyway. So, I guess I did a week, and then they up-squatted me to week 7 in another platoon, which was awesome because I then didn't have to do all the basic stuff again. We could kind of just insert into what we knew. And then from then on, I just kind of felt like everyone else. I just felt like we were on a level playing field. So I guess what was different was, I had a bit of a clue of what was going on. I knew what to expect. But it was just like, well, this is just my life now. This is what I do. And that was really cool. I really was happy with that decision.
So for you being the first female into artillery, was that looking back now, was that a daunting thing, or did you sort of at the time pass over that this is unique, like this, I'm the first?
As I said before, I had no idea what it meant. I was just like, well, I'm just going to do a job. Like, does it even really matter what's in my pants? Like, I'm just going to do this job like the rest of them. As long as I do my job well, like, no one should really care, right? Wrong. There was a lot of media attention around the fact that both internal media within the military and then external around the fact that, we were having females go into artillery now. And I guess it wasn't daunting. It was just more, I don't want to say confusing, but like, I think I was just a bit shocked that it was such a big deal. I was just like, why does anyone care? Like, are we just going to do our jobs? But, you know, I got to School of Artillery after doing Kapooka and getting there for IETs, and everyone's like, oh my God, that's the girl, that's her, that's Gunner Box. There it is. There's a girl. You know, I'd walk into the mess and 200 heads would turn my way and be like, there it is, the girl. Like, you know, so it kind of became like this big moving beast that I was still a bit like baffled as to why. But then the more I learned, the more I understood, and the more I spoke to people, I was like, oh, okay, like, this is really a big deal. So not daunting, just a bit baffling, to be honest. Yeah, just because of my lack of knowledge and lack of understanding of, you know, what it truly meant. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you went to the School of Artillery after Kapooka. What was that like for you? Like, what was the highlight?
Highlight of the School of Artillery as the first female to ever walk into artillery. Look, it was a challenging time. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. There was a lot about it that was very, very challenging. All eyes were on me. And, you know, I was doing a job that was quite technical, and I'm just not a mathematically minded person. And so, you know, I'm a kinesthetic learner, so I learn by doing. I don't learn by reading or, you know, writing. Yeah, so, you know, a lot of it is like, you know, weapon ID. Here's 50, you know, weapons and vehicles you need to go memorize them. And that's just not how I learn. So I just had to work really, really hard at it. But then I guess all eyes were on me, expecting me to fail because of the patriarchy. Expecting me to fail, you know, people had bets on whether I'd make it through or not. My peers were awesome because they knew no different. My course staff were awesome because they were like, well, let's work hard to get you through, you know. And it wasn't like I was getting special treatment. Like, there was heaps of the other guys that were shit at trigonometry too. And I was like, well, can we just stay back and have some extra tutoring if that's okay? And the course manager, of course, wanted us to do that because he didn't want half his students to fail. But it was seen as, oh, well, she's getting special treatment because she's the girl. And I'm like, but there's 3 dudes here too. You know, I was just the one that instigated it because I'm the older, more mature one that was like, hey, can we have some help? So, you know, like at PT, I was reasonably fit. I ended up with shin splints though because I had just done so much running prior to going to Kapooka, and I didn't know how to look after my body and I didn't know how to train back then. I ended up with shin splints, which meant I couldn't run a lot, and it was like, oh, of course you can't, you know, of course you can't run. Oh, of course she's, you know, injured, of course. And I'm like, guys, come on, like I'm really fit. Like I'm an excellent swimmer, you know, let's take it to the pool, you know, and as it was, I ended up competing in the swimming carnival and winning a whole heap of points that the School of Artillery had never gotten before because they'd never been able to put chicks in those races. So highlight was that I did it, you know, I did it, I showed up, I got through, I passed, I, you know, completed everything I needed to complete, and, you know, I was able to march out. And so for me, that was like, as you say, watch me, you know, big, you know, middle finger up is like, hey, despite everybody here doubting me and all eyes on me, expecting me to fail and expecting me not to get through and, you know, doubting me, I got through. And so for me, that was a really big positive.
So where was your first posting after you'd finished at the School of Artillery, and where did you post to first?
Sure. So the only place that UAV operators can post to actually operate UAVs is 20 STA Regiment in Brisbane, so 20th Surveillance Target Acquisition Regiment. It's now just known as 20 Regiment. So that's where I was posted to, and that's where I had previously been as a reservist too, which was kind of nice to have, you know, I already knew a lot of people. And yeah, like there's not a lot of options with postings unless you kind of go back to the school as an instructor. There's a couple like, you know, different postings all around the place where it might just be like one person goes here or Kapooka obviously and that side of things. But yeah, ended up back home basically, which was nice.
So for you, like getting posted back home and you know, familiarity of being in Brisbane, what's a day-to-day like? What's a day-to-day in being a UV operator? What do you do?
I get asked this question a lot, you know, because now I work a lot with applicants. Like, what's a day in the life? I'm like, it's not as exciting as you would think. But also every day, it's not that every day is different. It's just that, you know, you're not just flying UAVs all day. For starters, you can't physically fly them on base because of the airspace restrictions. And we're so close to the airport here as well that you can't just go and like throw UAVs up. Plus there's no runway, all that kind of thing. So it might be different now because they fly a lot of the like micro and nano UAVs. The technology has evolved. So I'm not sure if they can, just throw it up from the parade ground now. But with the ScanEagle and the Shadow, you definitely couldn't fly it on base. So you had to go outfield to fly, which you don't do all the time. So a lot of the time you're spending in simulators. You need to maintain currency on UAVs as well. So doing X amount of flights, X amount of launch and recoveries, X amount of missions every month or every 3 months or, whatever it is. It might be very different now. So, yeah, you find yourself in the simulator quite a bit. Always start your mornings with PT, which I miss dearly. Being paid to keep fit is like the best thing ever. So always start the morning with PT, head off, get changed, come, have monos, come back. And then in the morning, you'd either go into some kind of lesson or you go into the simulator, or there might be, equipment maintenance to do, or, it kind of just depends on where you're at. If you're going field, it's like preparing everything to go field. If you've just got back, it's the clean up and the pack away and the refurb. You might be doing lessons on aviation theory. You might be doing lessons on weapons, whatever. And then, you go off to lunch, come back. Same thing, and some days there's like not much going on and they might say, everyone go and do personal admin, which is kind of code for hide in the DRN room and do sweet fuck all. Or you might actually have like purse admin that you need to do, organising dental, organising, weapons, sorting out housing, that kind of stuff. And then, knock off around 3:34. So that's a day when you're on garrison,
So for you, when did you first hear rumours that you were going to be deployed to Afghanistan in 2009?
Very early. So I had, I knew that unit was high tempo with operations because when I was there as a reservist, there were people in Timor, there were people in Sudan, there were people in Iraq, and I think people had just started to go to Afghanistan. I can't actually remember when the first trip went. They were either just about to head off or they were already there. So I knew that it was high tempo, and I knew that provided there was like no, medical reasons or anything, that I would probably end up on the roster to go. So went to IETs, got to the unit, we got put in the little shit kicker troop, and straight away it's like, yep, you guys are going on ScanEagle course next. And you kind of knew that if you were getting a ScanEagle course, that your name was getting put forward to possibly go, and deploy. They wouldn't spend all the money doing that otherwise. So I'm just trying to think. So I got there 2008. I went in 2009. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like end of 2008. No, I actually was a reserve for the trip that went before me. So I got there in April 2008. And then spent the year there, and then sort of end of 2008 got told, yep, you're reserved for the next trip, which didn't really mean anything. I still had to do a bit of their admin, but like I didn't really need to like train with them or anything. It was just kind of like if someone, I don't know, fell over and broke their wrist, I would go. I shouldn't laugh because that actually did happen to one of my friends. They were playing footy and ended up breaking his ankle a few weeks out. But so it was very early on, and then if you're a reserve for one trip, for sure you're going to be on the next trip. And that was June 2009 was when I went.
So what were your family's impressions when you said, hey, guess what, I'm deploying to Afghanistan? Were they years earlier when you said, hey, I've joined the army, were they worried?
So funny story. I'm just trying to think of the timing. So 2006, 2007. Yeah, it might have been like end of 2007. We're having Christmas, family Christmas, and there was a conversation about and it was with extended family too. There's just a conversation about what should we do for next year's Christmas, or what should we do, or we should do this, or anyway. And I said, it's funny to think I could be in Iraq this time next year, because I knew I was going full time, and I knew it was it wasn't such a out there statement to make. I didn't know for sure that I would go or anything. I was just like, well, I'm going to be in a unit that's deploying. It's really possible. And I got laughed at. So closer family members just laughed at me and were like, yeah, righto, yeah, idiot. And so then that, sort of year and a bit later, and I was like, I'm going to Afghanistan. And they were like, no, you're not. I was like, well, yeah. I'm not close with my family. I'm really close now with my sister, but I'm not really close with anybody else. So it wasn't kind of everyone was a blubbering mess or anything. It was just sort of shit, eh? Okay, well, yeah. And when I sort of had to tell, like, my mum, she was a bit naturally concerned, as all mums would be. But, you just have to educate your family on what it actually means and what you're going to be doing and where you're going to be working and what's involved. And it's like, this is my job and this is where I'm going to be located and what I'm doing, like, and educate them on what it actually means. So, yeah, it wasn't like everyone was, like, crying or anything like that. It was just more like oh, okay, well, yeah, you weren't lying. I was also, was I married? Anyway, I'm previously married. And, my partner back then, he was in the army too. And so when I was like, oh my God, I'm on the next trip, his first response was like, oh, jealous. So, it was kind of like, obviously as a young digger, that's what you work towards, And so it was like, oh, I got there first. Haha,
So you deploy to Afghanistan. What were your first impressions of country and like when you had boots on the ground, and what did you have much interaction with the locals when you arrived?
No, not with the locals. So I arrived we did, I guess you call it like, your staging area was in Q8. So we did our 4 days there, did all our training and stuff that we had to do there, spent a heap of money at the PX store, the American PX store, and went to, Fat Alley and bought Macca's just because you could. And yeah, I really loved that. That was my first time being overseas ever. So I was just like, this is the coolest thing. Flying into Afghanistan, so flew straight into like secure compound. So no interaction with locals. First interaction is with movers. And I just remember stepping off the back of the C-130, boots on the ground, and I just looked around because we're in the TK Bowl, so it's just surrounded by mountains. It was the middle of the year, so it was summer. And I just looked around and I was just like, holy shit, I'm so far away from home. This is like the coolest thing ever. I still am devastated that they don't stamp your passports, because the second stamp ever on my passport would have been Afghanistan. The first would have been Q8. Now I've like travelled to heaps of places, so it's sort of like, I've got plenty of stamps now, but it just would have been cool that that's your first. So yeah, I just remember like looking around, just being like, holy shit, like this is probably the most feared country on the planet, and I've just like stepped foot in here, and I've never been so far away from home. It's insane.
So for like, obviously you're on deployment for 9 months. Was it a 9 months?
No, just 6.
Oh, just 6.
Yep.
Okay, so
I mean, not just 6. It's still a long time.
yeah, it's still
6.
a long time away, like from family and friends. And what was your highlight of your first trip, and what was the standard day of operating like for you?
Yeah, so answer the last question first. So we did 12-hour shifts, so we were 12 on, 12 off. So I did 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. And a standard day was normally you'd fly for 2 hours, have a break, fly for 2 hours, have a break. Sometimes you fly for a bit longer. It would just sort of depend on the missions, but they generally like, in aviation, they like to make sure you have proper crew rest. UAVs is... A lot of, AVOs would cringe, be like, you're not real aviation, but we technically fall under aviation rules. So anyway, that's why I call it aviation. But yeah, so you've got to fly, you've got to conduct your missions, you've got to do post-mission reporting. But then there's also just like the basic shit to do around the compound. We've got to like fill the brewer, and we've got to clean up and empty the bins and do all the tidying and, whatever. I still love going and sitting up on the roof and catching some sun, just get away from everyone, have a breather of the not so fresh air there. But yeah, you were just always busy. And when you weren't doing anything, you were allowed to kind of just sit and, watch a bit of telly or, whatever. iPhones weren't a thing yet, so it wasn't like you're just sitting on your phone. They were later that year. But, you were kind of expected to also do continual professional development as well. So, doing lessons, doing reading, making sure you're keeping up to date on what's going on, like with the aviation world, with our platform, and then also like the intelligence picture over there as well.
So was there any, when you were over there on your first deployment, was there any casualties while you were in country?
Yeah, so there was, and I can't remember the exact time or the exact date, but we were fairly established by the time it happened. But yeah, Private Ben Ronaldo was killed under our watch, I guess, which sounds pretty terrible when I say under our watch, but I just mean we were on mission when it happened and I was flying when it happened. So do you want me to go into that story?
Please, yeah.
So he was 22, young infantry soldier out on patrol, pretty routine patrol. That's a lot of what we did was patrol overwatch. We wouldn't necessarily watch them. We'd be panning forward, providing intel on what we saw so they knew what was up ahead, if anything, of concern. We were just conducting the patrol as normal. They were kind of in a small, like, I don't know, like cluster of koalas, which are like the houses, I guess, over there. So they weren't dispersed as such, like they all had eyes on each other, but they were kind of just like, they weren't like, in one line or in one formation. They were kind of like walking in and around, panned forward, panned back, panned forward, panned back, as always do. Saw a bit of movement in and around the place, but it wasn't anything unusual. Like there's always kids running around, or there's always people scurrying to and from houses. It's pretty normal. And, as I kind of panned back, we just saw this explosion. And it came from a footpath, I guess. And you just sort of saw like the dust just go everywhere. And we were just like, what the fuck just happened? And so I've just reported straight back to my mission commander, hey, bomber, look, because he could see the screen. So I have my screen, but we've got like big, I'm pointing, it's not really good for podcasting, but we've got like big, flat screen TVs so that everyone can see the footage. Plus the footage is in headquarters as well. And I've just gone, straight away, you are taught immediately, get the grid. So mark the grid, threw the grid back. And I just said, look, this has just happened. Not 100% sure because I didn't see it happen. It was as I panned back, the explosion happened, because you're not supposed to watch them. They know where they are. They know what they're doing. They want to know what's up ahead. It was just coincidence that I happened to, be there when it happened. Sorry, I get a bit flustered talking about it. It's, I just don't want to, I always just want to, do him justice. We were then instructed to pan around and make sure that we were able to continue to look for any insurgent activity, as well as like try and find the trigger guy, which isn't always easy because they might be in a building and we can't see them. But you might always see guys running away, or they know we're going to get caught and you want to try and catch them. What happens to them is kind of not up to us, and we generally wouldn't see what happens to them. They'd be dealt with otherwise. So anyway, it came back on. So we, provide the grids, came back, just kept doing what we were, meant to do. And then it came back, one WIA, so wounded in action, and one KIA. And I guess instantly, like, my whole body just got goosebumps, and I just wanted to stay. I just wanted to stay and try and protect them, try and look after them. And so I was just, panning around, doing all the, the right things, followed all the policies and procedures, and, doing everything tactically correct at the time. I stayed on for 8 hours that day. So normally you'd stay on for 2 hours and have a break, but I stayed on and flew for 8 hours because I just felt like I had a responsibility. They didn't know me. They might not have even known we were there. Sometimes they could hear us, sometimes they can't. And I guess in a way I felt like I was responsible for what had happened, because I felt like I should have been able to see that it was going to happen, or see the trigger man, or see that there was something going on. There was discoloration in the ground, all the things, but it just wasn't there. It just happened. And I, for a long time, wore that responsibility, and I just wanted to stay on and try and protect them as much as I possibly could. And when you don't sort of find out straight away who it was or anything like that, and the base immediately goes into comms blackout, and that's purely to protect the families back home, so that the notification officer can get out, tell the families before they find out by other means. So we then got word back later that day, I think I was off shift, that it was Private Benjamin Ronaldo. He was 22, and that he was killed in action. There was nothing they could do to save him. The state of him after that explosion meant that there was no way that they could save him. So that was the one KIA that we had when we were on our deployment.
And I can still see today that it still affects you. Like I can see it, and it would be hard to. I can see that, and I've got to watch how I say this. You're not to blame. Like it's one of those things that just happens, and being in a war zone. Like I can't speak because I haven't been in a war zone, but every veteran I talk to says that things happen, and it's every time you go outside the wire, you never know if you're coming back or not. And for you to that would have been hard. And has it taken you a while to finally accept it and let that burden go?
Yeah, I mean, like initially, I probably didn't, take the personal steps to deal with it. I just sort of, because we had to keep doing our job. We had to get on with what we were doing. It was like, okay, turn up the next day and do missions as usual. Obviously there was a ramp ceremony and all that kind of stuff that happens after someone has passed. I tried my best to be involved in where I could based on my shifts. But yeah, I mean, I see his name pop up on social media a lot when it's the anniversary, and I always just have this like pang inside me that thinks like, I could have saved you that day, and that's our sole purpose, is to make sure that we're providing overwatch to those patrols to protect them. And I didn't protect him that day, and I could have, but at the same time, it's like if the evidence isn't there that the ground is discoloured and that there's an IED underneath and it's been covered back over. If you can't see that, you can't see that. If there's a trigger man and he's there with his little, Nokia 3310 or whatever devices they're using, but he's hiding in a building, I'm not going to see him. Back in the day, they didn't always have UAVs, and not every patrol that goes out has a UAV on it either. It would just happen. But I think and you've spoken to like a lot of people, particularly special forces guys who have, either been commanders of or been on patrol with or, been on mission with people who have lost their lives. And I think everyone holds an element of responsibility. What could I have done? If I had have just made this decision rather than that decision, could that have changed everything? 100%. And, at the same time, he and all his peers went on that deployment, like you say, not knowing if they're going to come back. And I went on a deployment not knowing if I was going to come back, and I was in the fob the whole time. It's the risk that you take, and it's the chance that you take to serve your country. And he obviously paid the ultimate sacrifice. And from what I knew, I didn't know him, but from what I have heard of him, he's just one of those guys that was well liked and everybody loved, and he was good at his job. And, it's just the way it goes, unfortunately. And yeah, it has taken a long time to come to terms with it. And it's only really been in the last sort of year or so I've started to talk about it a little bit more. I still hold, I don't think I'll ever not feel like I hold some sort of responsibility for what happened that day. I think it's just part of the process.
I think, and I know what you're talking about, because being in the fire brigade, I'm a crew leader and a deputy captain. And I said this to my mum probably 12 months ago, and when I became a crew leader, one of the more senior crew leaders said to me, "Adam, your life's going to change now." And I went, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "You're no longer going to care about your safety. You're going to care about the safety of others." And I was like, no, number one is me. Like, it's my safety. And he said, no. When you step up, when you become a crew leader, things change. And I didn't understand it until I was in that position. And now I get it. And I said to my mum the other day, I said, "Mum, if I pay the ultimate sacrifice," I said, "treat it and my crew survives." I said, "Treat it as a win." And she said, "But I've lost you." I said, "Yeah, but Mum, think of it the other way. If it was a decision that I made from my crew and I lost all of their lives, I couldn't live with myself." And I get what you mean. There's that responsibility of you feeling the responsibility to protect them. I totally get it. And it's something that I think until you're in that position, you don't know how you're going to react. And it's great to see that you've finally been able to talk about Ben and talk about that day, and I can see it. I'm sitting across from you. I can see it, that there's still that element there today that it still affects you, and it's, I think, as you say, you accept it for what it was, but you can learn to live with it now and just know that you did all you could that day, and it was just one of those things that was unfortunate. But now you can accept it and move on, and you're doing that, and I can see that.
Yeah. And, the thing that kind of helps me I guess, understand it a little bit better and understand, why I, think and feel the way I do about the situation is that, by way of actual, flying requirements and policies and procedures and TTPs, from a military sense, I did everything right. It wasn't like I was going rogue looking at some, goat doing something funny, or I wasn't doing anything ridiculous. Like, I was doing what I was meant to do. There was nothing I could have done. So, if I had have been not following those rules and not following those mission requirements, yeah, sure, we'd be having a different conversation. It could have also been my peer, who was the other digger on my shift flying. He could have been flying that day, and it could have happened under his watch. It's just by chance that I got assigned that mission. It just is what it is. So, RIP, and to Ben, and he's never forgotten, obviously by his family and his close friends, and by I know that everyone that was on shift with me that day still remembers him as well, and that's just what it means to serve your country, I think.
Absolutely. And for people who aren't aware, Carly, can you just explain what, and I know what a ramp ceremony is. Can you just explain what a ramp ceremony is to people who aren't aware?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, when someone passes away, they would then have a funeral and be buried or cremated, whatever their choices are. As the people in country, so that the soldiers essentially in country, or serving members in country, we are not going to be able to attend his funeral back home, because it'll be up to his family where he gets sent and what they do for his funeral arrangements. So a ramp ceremony is essentially having his coffin or his body loaded onto the aircraft, and depending on who's available and who's around, which is normally as many people as possible, like hundreds, they'll line a road or a path that leads to the aircraft, essentially. I think, and I could be very wrong here, but I think that there's always one soldier from the same section or company who is tasked to fly home with that person. And that they usually come back into country, or whatever. I think I've never done it, and I've never really asked questions, so they're not flying alone. But yeah, it's basically that coffin is then driven down in a vehicle to the aircraft, loaded onto the aircraft, and then the aircraft will take off and head back home and send that soldier back home. So
you have the ramps ceremony, and then you go on with your deployment. And is there anything else that stands out over you while you're over in country and on deployment?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of stuff. We had so many different experiences over there. There was lots of different types of missions that we were required to do. Sounds so weird. I enjoyed the patrol overwatch because I knew that I was never going to be like an infantry soldier on the ground out there doing the patrols. So I sort of felt like that's how you can kind of be in the thick of it without being in the thick of it. And I became quite good at that technique of flying and providing that overwatch. We used to do a few jobs for SOTG, so Special Forces. We also had some guys from the UAV element who were tasked in the forward UAV element, and they lived over the fence in SOTG, and they actually went out on patrols, grew beards, did the whole thing, and they went out with them. I unfortunately was not ever selected to do that due to my gender. The boss said that he didn't want to lose his best operator. He wanted to keep his best operator, back at the FOB, but I knew full well it was because you're a chick. Which is fine. It's not really, but it's fine. And so they would, so we would launch the aircraft and then fly it out to a handover point, and then we would hand it over to them through the technology. They would then fly it, do whatever they needed to do. We would have to turn our screens off because we weren't to be privy to what was going on. And then, we'd hear back on the radio because they've got like a little screen, and we'd hear back on the radio, yep, we're going to hand over in 5 minutes. Come back to that point. We'd then conduct the handover procedure, turn the screens back on, fly home. On one of their missions, so they would usually do their own convoy overwatch, unless it was just kind of like it didn't really it all comes down to the intel. So if it's okay for us to know where they are and what they're doing, then we'll conduct the mission. But if it's not okay for us to know due to security clearances or it's just none of our business, then they will do the flying. So they were coming home from a mission one day, I think it was from down south, and a convoy of I want to say 10 or 12 Bushmasters. And so our operator was embedded and he had handed the aircraft back over. I think he'd been flying for a really long time and he's like, I'm buggered. Can you guys take it back? So anyway, conducting convoy overwatch, very similar to patrol overwatch, panning forward, panning back, panning forward, panning back. I've panned forward and I've seen two locals, digging in broad daylight on a road. Bizarre for a lot of reasons. A, they never do it in broad daylight, and B, they would never do it as a convoy is there because they could be seen. It's normally they embed them at night time, or they might hear through their own channels that there's going to be a convoy coming at this time, and they would do it well ahead of time. So they've gone and activated the device, I guess, and I've seen them digging, and it took me a second to actually report it to my mission commander to be like, because I just couldn't believe that they were actually so stupid to be doing this in broad daylight. And so I sort of hit back. I was like, hey, Bomber, can you please look at this? I was dumbfounded. And he's like, what the fuck is going on? I'm like, yeah, exactly. They're digging ahead of the convoy, a couple hundred meters. I can't remember if the boys could see them on the ground. They might not have been able to see them that far ahead. So anyway, the general time to get a message from us to the boys on the ground is sometimes up to 6 minutes. So by the time we go from me to the mission commander to headquarters to their headquarters, and then pass the message back down, it takes time. And I was like, go, they need to know. Tell them, tell everyone, let's do your thing, you know? Obviously, I used proper military terms. That I didn't say do your thing. We're watching this convoy inch closer and closer and closer. So the locals had kind of dispersed behind a rock at this point. But we knew the location because we'd marked the grid. Watching them inch closer and closer, and I was just like, my heart's in my throat. I'm just like, this is going to be fucked. This is going to be so bad. They have to get this message to them. And you could tell the instant they got the message and the convoy just stopped. And it was within tens of meters from the actual bomb, I guess. And it was found. So they've then sent forward their engineers to, sort it all out. It was then determined that the size of the bomb would have taken out essentially the entire convoy. I think they said it was it would have taken out at least 6 of the vehicles because it was so big. So after the first vehicle rolled over, then that's the damage that it would have done. And then they've sent forward their elements to deal with. I say in inverted commas, to deal with those locals. We weren't allowed to watch that. We weren't privy to what happened to them. I'm pretty sure they're sipping chai tea in an afterlife somewhere. But yeah, I mean, that, it doesn't sound like much. It's I was just watching a convoy and they stopped. It's no, that's 10, 15 men that might not have gone home to their families, that might not have continued their service, that might never have seen their children ever again, whose children would be fatherless. All these things that run through my head that I'm just it was such a crazy moment in time. But, I saved the convoy that day. And, we had one of our own guys in there as well. And, yeah, so that was quite a significant time.
I was going to say for you, that's, and I say the word a proud moment, but proud's not the word. A moment of, I guess, with what happened with Ben, for you, as you said, that's your job. That's the role of what your patrol, you're doing Overwatch. And for you to save those guys, as you just said, that's 15 guys that got to go home to their families. They got to continue their deployment. So I guess proud it's the right word, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why we're there. That's why we do what we do. And yeah, to say 15 of them is, probably a bit of an exaggeration, but, it would have been vehicles damaged or people injured, as well as, definitely the first vehicle would have had fatalities for sure. So it would have been, as well as like the element itself then being fractured because they've lost so many people to fatality and injury, as well as the capability of the vehicles and whatever's inside the vehicles. Definitely a moment in time where I was like really stoked to be doing what we do. And, I guess following on from losing Private Ronaldo to then this moment was like, this is why we're here. This is why we do what we do.
So you come back to Australia. So you finish your deployment. You come back to Australia. Was it hard for you to adjust back to being back in Australia from Afghanistan, or was it just get back on with training, work, normal? Was it hard?
A bit of both. Like I had to just kind of just get on with things, I suppose. All the usual things. I had a bit of trouble sleeping, but, I was able to rectify that fairly quickly. I actually had a lot of trouble driving at night, which is bizarre because I never drove at night over there, but it was just, something to do with concentration or whatnot. But I still have, I don't know, I'm still a bit weird about driving at night nowadays, which now I have kids, I'm never out at night anyway, so it doesn't matter. But, just sort of all your normal adjustments, being around large crowds of people, just having to have conversations with people that aren't the members on your deployment. But, it just takes time to adjust. And, I got home and went straight into Christmas leave, which kind of helped. It meant we had an extended time off. And then when I got back to work, I got promoted straight away to Lance Bombardier and then went straight on to my promotion courses. So I kind of had to hit the ground running anyway and just kind of get back into it, which, was fine by me.
So in 2011, you went to Arizona for Shadow 200 course. What did that involve, and what was it like working with the US?
Yeah, so that was a full swan trip to America, paid for entirely by Defence, plus we got an allowance to be there. It was the best. So it was there for like 5-6 months. I think I ended up being there about 5.5 months or something. So we're basically just doing their version of IETs to learn how to operate what would then be our new platform to replace ScanEagle. So we lived in a hotel. We had a hire car between us. So you went over in small elements. So I think there was 1, 2, 3, there's 5 of us. 5? Yeah, six of us anyway. Went over in groups of like 5 and 6, and there'd be like one hire car between you. You all lived in a hotel, and you used to like get in that car, go into the base, which was like a 40-minute drive, and come home, and then you do all the normal things like gym, cooking, whatever, lots of study. And then so you just got into a really good routine over there, really good rhythm. It was probably the fittest and most ripped I've ever been. I don't know why, because I was like drinking and eating so much. But on the weekends you kind of could party. A lot of people used to like go and do weekend trips, travel around. You could kind of had a bit of freedom, for the most part anyway. And working with the US was awesome. It's so... I don't know, got to be careful how I word this. We obviously have really strict requirements on being able to join Defence here, and, aptitude requirements and fitness and psychological requirements and all that kind of stuff. Not everybody can join Defence, whereas over there it kind of seems like anyone and everyone can join Defence. And there'd be some dudes there that I'm like, what are you doing here? They're just so... just space cadets. And I'd just be like, you don't even want to be here. And they're like, yeah, but, I'm getting paid, so, and I'm like, okay, right. They just didn't care. But then we also worked with some Marines as well, and they're the opposite, which I loved. I was like, you guys are so green, it's amazing. Just a totally different culture, a military that is, an ally to us, but also operates very differently. It was good. We just got in a routine, did our thing, and had fun, and got to travel a bit, and it was good.
So at this stage, you come back from America, and then you're getting ready to deploy again to Afghanistan. At this stage, were you still the only female in the Corps at this stage, or had other females come into the Corps?
No, there was quite a few more. So I was there by myself for, I don't even know how long, maybe a year. I don't remember when the next cohort of girls came through. But, not long after me, there was was a couple more that came through, and then with then basically each course that graduated and came through, there was females on every one.
So did some of those girls deploy with you again in 2013?
Yep.
And
there was quite a few of us actually.
And what was for you? You deploy in 2013. What was it like on this trip, and what had changed in Afghanistan from your first deployment in 2009?
So our deployment was part of what they called the retrograde. I think that's the right word. Basically, like we're extracting out. So we were part of the pack up and moving everyone out of Afghanistan, or out of Tarin Kowt anyway. So I guess because everyone knew that Afghan trips were starting to dry up, it then meant that the type of person that was going on the trip, not from my unit, but from other elements, were clearly just people who hadn't had a trip yet. And it was like, oh, this might be my last chance. I've got to like weasel my way in. A lot of warrant officers. I've never seen so many warrant officers and like class 1 and 2 in the one location. I'm like, why are there so many of you? It's ridiculous. So many captains, like way too many captains in one location. It was very clear that there were people who were just like, oh, I need to try and get a trip, you know? So I guess on my first trip, we were in desert camps. The dress and bearing standards were still required, but a little bit more relaxed per se. Whereas on this time, we were in like normal Oz cam, and it was just kind of like being on base again. There's people telling you to like, you know, tuck your PT shirt in and put your hat on and take your hand out of your pocket, like all that kind of stuff that on my first trip wasn't really much of an issue. And then on the second trip, I'm like, oh wow, like we're full like charging people for not ironing the uniforms here. That's not true. You didn't have to iron, but it was more about that stuff than it was about the actual mission critical stuff, which is, you know, I guess I liked the regimented side of the military. So I was like, oh, okay, fine. But it just felt weird because I was like, why is this a priority when on the first trip it was all about the mission, when this time it was all about like being on garrison again. So that was a bit strange. And then ever so slowly they were just like packing the base up. So all of a sudden, like you'd go, because we were working weird hours, you know, you'd go to bed one day and wake up the next afternoon or whatever, and there'd be like an entire accommodation building had been dismantled, or so it was slowing down and closing down, and our missions were entirely different this time. Like we really didn't do any cool stuff at all. It was very much just a lot of Overwatch to make sure that as we were, you know, extracting out and closing down, that the bad dudes weren't trying to take advantage of that vulnerability.
So I guess for you, like you were lucky enough, lucky enough to have 2 trips. Your 2009 deployment, you felt that you're actually doing your role over there, what you were supposed to do. Would you say in 2013 it was different? You were just like, it was just a different mission, or? Oh
yeah, it was really boring. Like the actual like flying, and because I was a mission commander on this one as well, I wasn't really doing much flying, which I didn't love because it meant that I wasn't as proficient as an operator, whereas I was like really proficient as an operator. I had like heaps and heaps of flying hours, and I felt like I could almost do it with my eyes closed, whereas every time I needed to fly on this trip for currency reasons, I'd have to get like one of my diggers to sit with me and like just help me remember what everything was. And I didn't love that, because I always just feel like as the person, you know, in a leadership position, you should be a subject matter expert on that, and you should be the one guiding your diggers, but it's not like that with UAVs. So the missions were so boring. Our bosses were just flying for the sake of flying to like bust more hours up to kind of make us look good. Oh, look how many hours we did. I was like, yeah, but if you actually knew like what we're doing on those flying hours, it wasn't interesting. There was like one job that SOTG got us to do, and it was the other shift, not mine. And it wasn't anything wild. And then the SOTG boys brought them over like a carton of Red Bull, and the lads on the other troop were just like, oh, this is like the best thing ever. And I was like, oh man, on our last trip, I was like going over to the mess and eating like, you know, roast lamb and caviar. Not all the time, but like, you know, every so often you'd get invited over to the mess, and I'm like, oh, Red Bull, cool. Like, sweet, free Red Bull. So, you know, just totally different environment, like working environment, and just like completely different requirements for our platform. So
I guess you've said it that, okay, it was a bit mundane. What was the highlight of your 2013 trip?
Highlight of my 2013 trip. So I guess like I had an awesome troop. So like the boys that were in my troop were epic, like really good operators, like really, really good at their job, worked, really well, like, as a cohesive group. I don't know that I was always the best leader for them. No, sorry, I know for sure that I wasn't always the best leader for them. I was also going through some personal stuff at the same time, which shouldn't be an excuse, but it is. So, they were epic at their job, and it was a pleasure to work with them. I guess, like, highlight-wise, like, as far as missions are concerned, not even the same when it comes to, like, that 2009 trip. We had so many missions that were just, like, so awesome to be a part of. We just didn't have that on this trip. But I think for my second trip, it was more about, like, the team and the camaraderie and, what we were achieving together as a team. I really enjoyed that side of it.
So you come back from your second trip in 2013 and then you go to a teaching role at the School of Artillery. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so I asked for that job. I came back from that trip and like my whole personal life had changed. I was like now getting divorced, and I had always asked that in like 2014 that I be posted out because I had been at the unit for a long time and I was up for something different. I originally wanted to go to Kapooka, but my ex-partner at the time didn't want to go to Kapooka, and so we compromised on Pucka because his trade school was down there as well. So we were able to like make sure we had jobs down there that were fulfilling. And then, all that flipped on its head and I went anyway. And I really enjoyed it there. It was like a totally different environment, a super green environment, which I loved. The RSM was awesome. The CO was awesome, actually. It was a really, really good team to work for. I was very, very supported. I hadn't had the greatest experience with my hierarchy on my 2013 trip. There'd been like a few bits and pieces happen there which were like not very nice to deal with. And so when I got down there, I had, the SI, which is like the OC, call me in and just say, look, I don't really give a shit what's happened in the past, a year or 6 months, whatever. You get a clean slate here. I know you're going to be good at your job. I know you're passionate about it. Let's just go. Just show us what you got. And I was like, that's fucking sweet. Thanks. And the CO, which this doesn't ever happen, ever, but the CO also called me in and he said, look, I've been notified by your previous hierarchy of, this, that, and this and that. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. And, they've advised me that this is to be your ceiling rank and you're not to go any further than this. And that letter that I got that advised me of that just got put in the shredder, and I don't give a fuck. Welcome to the School of Artillery. Let's go. So it was just a really supportive environment and like a little bit of us and them between like the unit and the school, but it was kind of just like, oh, whatever crap everyone's going on with up there, we don't really care about it down here. We just want to get on with things. And so I was a good instructor. I really enjoyed instructing, and so I just really leaned into that and did the best that I could. I managed a couple of courses as well, and I did get promoted to sergeant. I did my sub 1 sergeant in pretty much as soon as I got posted there, and got promoted the next Monday after I graduated. So I was in the mess environment and I was living on base, and I just immersed myself in it. I was like, what else am I going to do around here? And I really enjoyed it. It was really good.
And you met, is that where you met your now fiance Michael, or?
No, we actually went to the same school. So we go way, way back. We're in different grades. And we weren't like friends or anything back then, but we knew of each other and we know all the same people. We still know all the same people. And, he joined the army pretty much straight out of school. And then, I joined a few years later, and he was posted to Adelaide and Townsville for a lot of his career. And then he ended up changing trades and went from ground-based air defence to UAV, and then we ended up working together for a lot of years. I always thought he was a bit of a dick, and he always thought I was really annoying, and even though we're colleagues, got along fine, it was like there was never any sort of romantic anything. And then it sort of wasn't until towards the very end of my time at the unit we were just hanging out a lot because we both sort of found ourselves single, and, he was doing some training for some goals that he had, and I was training as well. And, we just sort of were like, oh, hang on, actually, you're not so bad. oh, we've actually got a lot in common. Oh, we've actually got a bit of chemistry. And so that was the very end of 2013. And I posted out. So he stayed in Brisbane. I went down to Pucka. He went on a trip to Africa. I went on a trip to Thailand. And we just sort of kept in contact throughout that time. And then, he asked me to be his girlfriend via text a few days after Christmas while he was like in Uganda or something. And that was 8.5 years ago. So,
and still going strong. So you had a really good time at the School of Artillery.
Yeah.
And then you come to the decision to discharge. Why did you feel it was time to discharge?
I didn't. I thought I would be in forever. I thought I was a lifer. I wanted to be like, RSM of the Army. I was like, no, I'm going to go all the way. Like, this is me, I never foresaw myself leaving until I just didn't love it anymore. And I think that 2013 trip really fatigued me mentally more than I realised it would. And, for a lot of reasons. And I just I got to the school and I was enjoying myself and I liked the role and I felt really supported. And, I felt like I was a valued member of the team, which was really nice. But I just didn't love it anymore. And I didn't feel as green anymore. And I was like super duper green, I fucking loved it. And I just felt like I was losing a bit of that passion. And I felt like I was just existing in the job, just turning up, I used to get to work that bit early to get myself all prepped for the day. And not that you need to do that, but I just liked doing it that way. And then I was literally sleeping in my PT gear to roll out of bed at 7:25 to jump in my car and be down, at the office at 7:30 on the dot. I just didn't love it as much anymore. And I was just like, it's obviously I just need to go through the motions. It's fine. And then I thought, I maybe need to look at changing jobs. And I was looking at doing, a couple of other things. And then, Michael had been outfield and he was looking at doing, he had done twice the barrier test for Special Forces selection. And that was sort of his goal, was to go down that path. And that didn't eventuate for him for many reasons, mostly injury. And I was always, I don't know, because it was sort of a new relationship. It was like, if he gets in, he goes to Perth, I'll just go to Perth. I'll see if they can find me a job there. If not, I'll just maybe go reserve. Who cares? And I thought the fact that I was I'll follow a boy around was not the person that I was. But I was like, maybe I'm not loving this as much anymore. Anyway, when the Special Forces thing didn't eventuate for him, his plan B was to get out and travel the world. And I was always like, sure, whatever, and we were planning, in the works of planning and booking tickets for a holiday to Scandinavia. We were going to do 7 weeks traveling around. And he called me, it was middle of the year, and he called me when he got back from a field trip. I hadn't spoken to him for 3 weeks, and he said, I was thinking when we go to Scandinavia at the end of the year, maybe we just don't come back. And I was like, wouldn't that be nice? He's like, no, really? I was like, what are you talking about? So he gave me the rundown. He'd been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of research into, what we could do. And he's like, fuck it, let's go. And I want you to come with me. And he goes, I'm going to put in my discharge today. Tomorrow. So, yeah, cool. You can too. And I was like, whoa, hang on. But I'm never going to get out. This is wild. Anyway. And I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, life's too short. If not now, when? And so, I went in that night, drew up all my discharge paperwork. And then the next morning we had to actually coordinate it so that we did it within minutes of each other because the digger net fires up and because the two units have a lot of the same connections. We were sort of on the phone. He's like, all right, I'm going now. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going now too. And I got back to my desk and one of my colleagues said to me, I just heard a bit of goss about Crossy. And I was like, oh, yeah, what? He goes, he's just put in his D. And I was like, well, yeah, that's just where I got back from too. He's like, holy fuck, what are you guys doing? And I told him and everyone's just like, holy shit. Next thing I've got the RSM coming in, Sergeant Box, what are you doing? And, CO's like, are you sure? Blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, I didn't actually think this would be where my life would go. But, the suggestion was put out there and I liked the idea and, yeah.
So you discharge and then what happens next with Carly and Michael?
Yeah, so I never wanted to be the term crusty old, warrant officer, crusty old sergeant. I didn't want to be, just in the job because, I didn't want to be really jaded and whatever. And so I just sort of felt like I can leave on a high. I can leave after a really positive experience, or, not always positive, but, I've had a good run. I've done a lot of cool things in my career, so, it's time to go. So we then started to sell everything that we owned, quite literally. We're putting everything on eBay. This is before Facebook Marketplace. So putting everything on eBay, we're just selling everything. It was wild. And Gumtree, and, sold cars, sold appliances, sold clothes, sold everything. And, we were keeping a few things, which we were putting in a storage container at Michael's parents' house. And, at the end of 2014, I went on leave before my discharge in January. And I just kind of had my removal go to his place. And then from there, we just kept selling everything. I sold my car, and then we did a removal from there out to his parents' place, and then that was it. We were like, we don't really live anywhere now. We closed down our phones, didn't have any bills, nothing. And, we had a one-way ticket to Iceland. And, we were just like, well, let's just travel indefinitely. We just don't really know where this is going to take us. Let's just see what happens.
Well, I have heard, Carly, and you went to Iceland. I've heard it's very expensive. So how long were you in Iceland for?
3 weeks. So it is very expensive. We had sold everything that we possibly could, plus we had our own savings, and then our own Afghan money and everything. We just pooled it all together. And so we just knew that if we lived frugally and were very careful about what we did, that we could stretch this out for quite a long period of time. We also then did this thing called Workaway, where you basically apply to go and work somewhere in exchange for food and board. So you're not making any money, but you're also not spending any. So we did that in a lot of places as well, which was able to kind of extend us out. We were trying to get a Workaway in Iceland, but we just couldn't get anyone to accept us. We did 3 weeks there, and then we went to a Workaway in France. And we just continued to do that. We ended up spending a lot of our time in Africa.
Yeah, right. What was that like for you?
Amazing. So we spent a bit of time in France. That was awful, but that's more about the people we were staying with. And we were actually planning on staying in Europe for a long time. We got to Iceland in January, and we were like, oh, no, that's not true. We got there in December through January. Then we went to France, and we always thought, we'll just keep doing this around Europe until Oktoberfest, and then we'll go somewhere else. We did 3 weeks in France, hated it, and we're just like, this isn't where we want to be. And we had done an overnight road trip to the top of Spain. And Michael was just like, I do not love Europe so far. I was like, well, we've been to one place, but sure. Europe is just really expensive. And so, we're just sort of like, this isn't really what we foresaw ourselves doing. We then went to Macca's, spent about €1,000 on Macca's, and just sat there, and we were just like, what are we going to do? We thought we were going to stay here for a long time, but now we're not loving it. What are we going to do? And he had previously been to Africa and just loved it. He was like, I just want to go back to Africa. He's like, that's the only place I can see myself going. So we got back that night, jumped on our laptop, figured out what we were going to do. And there was a trip through a company called G Adventures. He had previously done a G Adventures trip. And there was a trip that was literally leaving in a week, and it had spaces, and we just booked it. We're just like, fuck it, let's just go. And so then we booked our flights to Nairobi, and then went downstairs in the morning and said to our host, we're like, hey, can you give us a ride to the train station tomorrow? We need to go to Toulouse because we're going to get a flight out to Nairobi. And they're like, oh, okay. Are you not enjoying it here? And we're like, no. And I didn't say it, but later on, we still joke about you're awful people. You're horrible, and we don't want to be here anymore. But anyway, literally within 48 hours, we were in Nairobi. And then, the next day our trip started. So we did 7 weeks on an overland trip, and went through a bunch of countries there, heaps of cool experiences. And then, got to Cape Town in South Africa. And, it was before that actually. We were in Namibia, and we were like, this place is cool. There's heaps more we could see. I reckon we could do this on our own. And so at night times we were like, when we would get internet, we were figuring out how to, let's hire a vehicle and come back and do it ourselves. We got to Cape Town, hired a vehicle, did another 3 weeks going through Namibia and Botswana on our own, which was super easy to do. Got to a place called Ngepi Camp, which is in northern Namibia. It's kind of an eco camp. And we're going to do one night there, did 5, and just loved it. And it was just a really nice place to be. And the owner happened to be there, and the owner's not always there. And so we just cornered him one day and we're like, hey, like, have you heard of Workaway? This is what it is. Would you have us? If we just stayed here for food and board. And he's like, oh, let me have a think about it and we'll talk again at breakfast. And we're like, oh, okay, no worries. So the next day rolls around and he's like, I've had to think about it because I don't just want you guys to stay just because it's good for you. Like, it has to be good for me too. I'm like, yeah, of course. He's like, I've got a veggie garden, organic veggie garden that I want to sustain the kitchen. So one of you can figure that out. I was like, sweet. Thanks, Google. Know nothing about gardening. Awesome. I need someone to run the bar, and I've got a tree rejuvenation project with the local women that, we sort of started, but we need to continue with and have someone head that up and create like some online systems for it as well. So we're like, done. And this is a big thing with veterans, like, when people get out of the military and then they don't have any purpose, things fall apart. And that's based on our experience, but also a lot of other people I've spoken to. If you don't get out and have something to do, you're going to find life difficult. When we got out and we just started traveling, and we were like, oh, this is just so weird, and like wherever we would get to, we'd naturally fall into a routine and be like, oh, we'd get up, we'd have our coffee together, we'd have breakfast, we'd go do this, come back, we'd do a workout, sit and have another coffee, and then we just naturally fell into a routine. And so we quickly realized that we really had to have some purpose if we we're going to keep traveling like this. So like literally the next day we were like, yep, awesome, cool, we've got to drop this vehicle back, so we'll sort that out, we'll figure out what we need to do, we'll get the bus back up, and then we'll come stay. He's like, yep, no worries, while you're down there, buy some seeds for the veggie garden, you might need this, you might need that, you might need this. We're like, okay, sweet. So then drove back, dropped the vehicle off to Finduk, which is the capital in Namibia. Spent a bit of time there, got the next bus up. It's like this 12-hour overnight bus. It's horrible, but it's the only way to get there. And then we got there and it was like, sweet, I've gone up to the garden and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I had two of the workers with me, and because of the whole careful how I word this, like the whole leftover effect of the apartheid era, the guys that were working there instantly looked at us as their bosses because we were white, and Michael and I were trying to explain to them, no, we're just volunteering, we're just here to do work like you guys, we're just working with you. And it's like, sir, ma'am, and oh yes, whatever you do, whatever you say. And it was they respected us because we were very, very respectful of them. And we didn't treat them like shit, whereas a lot of like Afrikaans people treat black people like shit. Not everybody, but we definitely saw instances of that happening, and we just were like so baffled as to why. We're like, but they're the people that work here, like they're helping you and making this an enjoyable experience for you. So that took us a bit of getting used to, but once I sort of figured out that, okay, I'll make you the leader and you're his offsider and then you're his offsider and you guys all work together, and here's what I need you to do. Can you guys do it? Because you know more about this than I do. And, I go away, come back that afternoon, and they would have like done all this awesome stuff in the veggie garden. It's like, oh, cool. Now we're working on it together. Michael had previously run the boozer at the unit we were in. So he just ran the bar like the boozer bar. And then, the tree rejuvenation project, we kind of just like created our own spreadsheets for that, and, we'd go in every day and not every day. We would go out every couple of weeks and, pay the women that were responsible for looking after the trees. We were there for about 3 months. We were able to extend our visa ever so slightly, but Namibians are very strict on visas as well because they feel like you're taking a job from them. Even though we're volunteering, they still saw it as that's a job that someone could have. If we were able to extend our visa, we'd probably still be there today. We just loved it so much, and it's our dream to one day live back there somehow. So from there we then ended up in Mozambique, came home for a bit to just deal with some life admin, and then went back through Asia, did a lot of time in Asia, and then decided we wanted one more round of Northern Lights. So we're in Bangkok one day, and then literally in 48 hours we're in Norway. Did some time up through like Norway, went to Svalbard, which is even further. That's the most further away I've ever been from home. You can Google map that one. And then we decided that we'd like to come home because living out of a suitcase for a long period of time, you just kind of get over it a bit. So it's been about 18 months And it was sort of when we were up in Norway, we sort of had the idea that we would start a business. And so, everything kind of just fell into place from there.
So you came home and you started the Barracks Gym. What was that like for you, and did it take off like it is now, that it's an amazing thing that you do for applicants for defence?
So what it is now wasn't the original idea. Michael had decided, because we were like, when we get back, what are we going to do? Like, we've got to get jobs. What are we going to do? And so we had a few ideas, and, we both had PT quals, and he's like, oh, I don't want to work for some muppet in a commercial gym. Like, I want to start my own gym. So he was looking at like franchised gyms, and, was looking at going down that path, and then decided that they were too restrictive, and he wanted to have a bit more freedom to, do what he wanted to do and implement ideas. And so he was like, fuck it, I'm going to start my own. So he then created a business plan based on like SMEAC, so, orders format.
Yes, I know SMEAC very well.
So, it's not a normal way to start a business plan, but it's what worked for us. And, we sort of tossed around a few different names and landed with the Barracks Gym. And then, once we got home and we got ourselves a place, and I was just working part-time somewhere whilst he set it up. And every time he showed me a new commercial premises, they were just getting bigger and bigger every time. And it wasn't like we were just moving from like a garage gym to, like we had no clients, we had nothing, we had no way of paying the rent, nothing. So we went into business with zero clue how to run a business, and we just made shit up literally, and still do that to this day. And you just learn and figure it out as you go. And, as I said earlier, anyone can do anything. You've got Google at your disposal, and mentors and people you can ask and people you can look to. But at the most part, if you want to figure it out, you will. And so originally it was meant to be a gym for veterans and general population. We then realised that working with veterans was going to be, I guess, a little bit challenging, because there's already organisations out there like Mates to Mates and Soldier On that were sort of offering fitness for veterans for free. And so, when we were reaching out, a lot of people were like, oh, no, I just use the Mates to Mates gym, or I just do this, or I just do that. So we're like, oh, okay, fair enough. And so then, about a month or two in, we had quite a few clients that were general population. We were like, oh, yeah, this is all right. Michael just had the idea. He's like, why isn't anyone training applicants? And he did a bit of searching around. He's like, there's so many Facebook groups where there's applicants in there. Why don't we try that? Like, he's like, let's run an applicant session like this week. I was like, we've got no people. Like, what are you talking about? So anyway, we just jumped in these Facebook groups. And we're like, hey, we've got this gym in Brisbane. We're going to start training applicants. We've got this experience in the military. Like, come train with us if you want. And so, we did a complete pivot. So instead of working with veterans, we then started working with people from the other end. And we had 4 people show up to the first night, and then the second session 4 people showed up, and then the third session 10 people showed up, and then it just grew from there. It just grew and grew, and we started off having 2 sessions a week, and right before we closed earlier this year, we were running 21 sessions a week. So it just continued to grow.
And you just mentioned that it closed. You're not fully closed, as Carly's just. Carly, as we mentioned earlier at the start, when we first jumped on, so Carly and Michael experienced floods in Brisbane at the start of 2022, and Carly, I've watched Carly's story for a little bit. We've become really good friends, and she had the whole process of going through COVID and everything, and it just, Carly, can you, if it's not too painful, can you explain how you and Michael came to the decision of closing the premises, but what you're doing now, it's still, the Barracks Gym is still up and running?
Yeah. We are still very much running. It's not painful. It's disappointing, but it's, it's also just what's another adversity in this climate of the crazy world we live in. So obviously in 2020, in March 2020, everything shut down. All gyms, all cafes, everything that was deemed not essential was shut down. And we had always had online training, which, thank God. And the only reason we had online training is because early on, we had the gym, but I always had people, mostly through Facebook, always messaging or commenting in, groups. And we ended up starting our own groups as well, saying, oh, I wish you're in my city. I wish you're in this city. I wish you're in this city. And, even that early on, we started to look at, we should franchise, knowing nothing about business. Let's franchise. Let's do this. Let's do that. I'm like, oh my God, now I just couldn't. And yeah, so I was pregnant with my first child and really, really unwell. And we were living in the gym at the time because we couldn't afford to pay rent in a house and a commercial premises when we just didn't have the income coming in yet. And so we're like, oh, well, let's just move into the gym office for 6 months. And yeah, I was pregnant with my first daughter and very, very, very unwell. And I just used to like do what I had to do down in the gym, and then I would just come up and die in bed for the rest of the day. And I had said to Michael, like, I've just got so many people messaging me saying, like, I wish you were in Sydney, I wish you were in Perth, I wish you were here. So I think we should look at starting online training. And I found this company that has a course that teaches you how to do online training. And we didn't have a lot of income at the time to be paying for courses, but I said, I just think the return on investment is going to be worth it. And so I then had to like dig deep into everything I had, every carb I was consuming at the time, which was all I could consume, and get this course done. And it was such a success. So I still, with that course, I had like the biggest launch that anyone's ever had on that course. The biggest lot of leads that anyone's ever had come in as well, which is pretty cool considering how small our niche is. So I just did the course like to the letter. And I still, to this day, like 5-6 years later, and because I'm on their testimonial, I get a lot of people contacting me going like, oh, is it worth it? Is it worth it? I'm like, look, I can't speak for what it is now, but I did it to the letter and I got results. If you're going to like pay off half of it, you're probably not going to get the same results. And so, yeah, so I did that. And then, we were bringing in people and making money pretty much straight away. And we just had, you know, like I'm still in contact with some of my OG online training girls. And, you know, I used to put like, you know, their programs in a PDF document, in a Dropbox, and that's how I would deliver it every week. Now it's very different. It's all app-based. And yeah, we just continued to grow online, which so glad we did, because then come COVID, when everything shut down, we had our online system. We just pivoted everybody onto that. And we were also having lots of people sign up because people were losing their jobs in like hospitality and stuff. And so they were like, oh, well, defense seems like a secure bet. I'm going to join defense. So thank God we had that. Reopened at the end of COVID and then went through subsequent lockdowns every 5 minutes, which is, you know, extremely annoying. But again, thank God for online. And then, yeah, earlier this year, late February, early March, Brisbane flooded. It literally just rained nonstop for so long. And Brisbane, as it turns out, has really shithouse drainage. And yeah, pretty much all of Albion went under. You know, Milton, West End, like we have other friends that lost their gyms as well. Who have reopened, power to them. But yeah, unfortunately there's no, insurance just doesn't cover for floods. And that's pretty much a lot of businesses around here just haven't been able to make it through. And yeah, there's no government support. So where the government's out there telling you they're giving everyone 50 grand, I've not seen a cent of that. They deem a lot of people ineligible. So I guess the damage that was sustained to the gym, and all the equipment and the facility itself meant that, you know, the cost of recovering from that was just too much, and money that we would have to pull out of our own pockets and potentially go into debt for. You know, we ran the numbers 1,000 times and tried to figure out the best path forward, and we just decided that we just couldn't reopen. I've got 2 little kids who already take a back seat to our business, and yeah, we just sort of made the call that we weren't going to reopen, and we were going to pivot to being fully online, which is what we do now. And yeah, that's been an adjustment to, you know, we always had it there, but now we're like, okay, it has to be like fucking awesome. And yeah, like that's sort of been the way forward for us. So it now means, and the best part about it is we can, and we were anyway, but we can literally help you from anywhere in the world. It's not about like, oh, I wish I was in Brisbane to train with you. That's not a thing anymore. It's like, you can be in Antarctica and I can help you. You know, you can be in, I don't know, Canada. And I had a Canadian lady training with us. I had a lady from New Zealand training with us recently. So, you know, we can help you from anywhere. And that's the part I love about it the most, is although it's not ideal that we had to close, you know, we can still help people from all over the place.
So for you with the gym, what do you love about, like, obviously it's the applicants that come through and their personal, what is it for you? What's your proudest moment when, you know, they go to their, their ceremony day, or what is it?
Oh, like their enlistment day, yeah.
Yeah. What is it for you that gives you the most love of being in the gym?
Yeah. So we started out with ADF applicants, and then at the start of 2020, we opened up to police applicants as well, just by demand. You know, people were asking, would you take on police applicants? And we always said no. So we always want to just stay in our lane, and we don't have police experience. So, but then, you know, we're like, the training's still the same. You know, they're going to have the same benefits in the same community as well. And then earlier this year, we opened up to fiery applicants as well. So, you know, we're sort of able to, you know, see people head off on all different paths now as well. They get sworn in, they go, if they're an officer, they appoint into the ADF. If they're, you know, enlisted, then they enlist. So that's obviously so awesome, in seeing people pass their fitness tests and then, you know, enlist. I love that. But my favourite part is seeing people in uniform, you know, when they send us photos of them at their graduation ceremonies or, you know, whatever, and they go from being this shitbag civilian that walked into the gym when we had the gym, you know, with, I guess, you know, a goal and a dream and, I don't know, like not a lot of fitness, or, you know, maybe some fitness but not the right fitness. And then, you know, we're able to really work with them and mentor them to get to a point where they're like absolutely kicking ass, and then you see them like all polished in uniform. It's just the coolest thing. And to know that we were part of their story to get them there, I just love that.
So going forward now for you, what, like looking back, was the military the best decision you ever made, joining the military and doing through the life experience that what you've gone through? Would you change anything?
No, not at all. I'm a very big believer in, you know, the universe gives you what you need when you need it. That's not always a positive thing. I'm still wondering why the universe gave us flood water, and I don't know why we needed it then. But, you know, the pivot now has been that, you know, my life is now this. But yeah, I think that those opportunities and those experiences sort of fell into place for me, you know, when it was meant to. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't go into the military full time. Like, I certainly wasn't going to like stay in some shit admin job. You know, I would have been bored out of my brain. You know, so I don't know what I would have done. So I think that coming into my life at that point in time was so good. And, you know, it's gifted me so many good opportunities, so many different values that I now still hold close that maybe wouldn't have been in my world if I hadn't joined the military. You know, friendships as always. You know, obviously now I've ended up with a fiance and 2 kids out of it as well. But yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't change it. Not at all.
So, and you just mentioned that you've got Michael and you've got your 2 kids. And for you going forward, explaining to them like military and what it's about, and on Anzac Day, do you explain to them what it means to serve your country? And
yeah, so my daughter is 4.5, so this has sort of been the first year that she is able to comprehend that Mummy and Daddy used to be in the army, and we can show her pictures and we can show her our uniforms and our medals, and, you know, she's got her own little set of miniatures that she wears as well. And so while she doesn't fully understand what it means to be a soldier or, you know, a sailor or whatever, she knows that Mummy and Daddy were in the army. They used to wear this. And they used to go to the army, you know, and, you know, we've both spoken to her about, you know, we went to Afghanistan, and Michael's been to Timor as well, and sort of, you know, without getting into nitty gritty, age appropriate, you know, conversations about, you know, we went to like look after our country essentially. And so, you know, she understands enough for her age, I guess. My son is 1, so he doesn't really care about anything except eating. But yeah, you know, like we're not going to shove it down their throats per se. It's not like you must go to Anzac Day and you must stand there and respect and wear this and do that and whatever. It's like, this is part of our story, and if you want to come and do an Anzac Day service, then awesome. You know, my daughter has been to a couple now, and, you know, yeah, she's been... she doesn't fully understand what's going on, but she's respectful enough and does, you know, all the things that you need to do. And I think it's really cool that they get exposed to that. And, you know, moving forward, like when she starts school next year, I'm sure that'll be a big part of, you know, when they're at school, and for her to be able to go, oh, my mummy and daddy are in the army. My mum and daddy went to Afghanistan. Like, I know that she'll have a lot of pride, and, you know, probably give her a bit of street cred as well. So yeah, I mean, they're still young, you know, so explaining it to them is different. But, you know, as they get older and it becomes more appropriate to explain more to them, and, you know, they might listen to these podcasts and hear a little bit more about what we've experienced over time. And they'll be able to see that, yes, mum and dad actually did used to be cool, even though now we're maybe not so cool. But yeah, I think it just comes down to like what's age appropriate and understanding more and more as they get older.
So just like we're coming to the end, and just to finish up, Carly, for young people out there, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self? And looking back, would you change anything in your life?
A lot of people answer that question with, no, I wouldn't change anything because that was just the experience that I was meant to have. I wouldn't change the sequence of events, but I would change the way that I respond to them. So what I would tell my 18-year-old self is to just back yourself. Because being insecure and, thinking that, you're incapable of doing things because you're a female or because you're not smart or because of this or that was so prevalent back then. Nowadays, women are at the forefront of a lot of, lots of things. And, women are leading in areas where they previously have not led. And, women are able to speak up and back themselves so much more without consequence now, whereas back then it came with consequence. So I wish that I could tell myself, to just back yourself and to stand up for what you believe is right and to stand up for yourself. And the only thing I would change is that I backed myself and I stood up for myself and had the balls to actually stand up for myself a little bit more than I did back then, rather than just sit down and take a lot of shit that I probably didn't need to take.
I'm sitting across from you and I'm laughing because I know you, Carly Box, now. You are someone that is, you're fierce, you're determined. You do back yourself and you're badass. And I forgot to mention at the start that you run a podcast called Becoming Badass, and you are badass, and and I've followed your story, and I wanted to get you on because I believe you are an inspiration to a lot of people out there to, and even to me. I see what you've done in your military career and also now is back in civilian. It's awesome, and you do inspire a lot of people, so well done for that. And what are your plans going forward with Michael and the kids?
Good question. I guess we would love to, we do anyway. We're continuously building the business. We work on the business. It's our job. We're continuously building that we would love, okay, I'm going to calm down a bit. It has always been our goal to impact every applicant that goes forward into the ADF, and now police and fireys in some way, whether it's they trained with us, they know someone that trains with us, they have benefited from, following us on social media. We want the Barracks Gym to always be a household name. So that doesn't change. We always want people to have been impacted some way in a positive way. We also, I guess, are working on other endeavours, I suppose. Michael's got a few business ideas outside of, military altogether that he'd like to pursue. I've got some other business ideas that I'd like to pursue as well. And because we work on the Barracks Gym together, and now that we don't have the gym, we work together at home full-time 24/7, I think it'd be nice if we had our own individual things as well. So yeah, we're still kind of recovering and finding our feet after losing the gym and pivoting to being fully online. We're in a good place now, and we're starting to really understand this new identity that we have with the Barracks Gym. And yeah, we've kept it as the Barracks Gym. It's a brand, it's a household name, and it's I get the occasional person that contacts us to say, oh, it's not actually a gym. I'm like, well, no, it was, but it's kind of it's just a name now. So, we'll always have that, and I think we'll also want to just maybe have our own little side gigs as well, to challenge us, and I just think that'd be nice. And I guess moving forward, travel was always such a huge part of us and who we are, and we want to have that in our life with the kids as well. And now that we work online, we've got the ability to work remotely, so yeah, it'd be pretty cool to be bringing TBG to you from Africa. So yeah, I mean, at the moment we're just kind of getting through what this year has thrown at us. My daughter starts school next year, so there's all those normal parent things. I'll probably be working in the tuck shop next year. I don't want to, but I'll probably have to. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really open to us continuing to evolve. And, I've started to get into, as we were talking about before, a bit of, speaking, and I'd love to do more of that. I really, really enjoy that. Getting some more speaking gigs. And yeah, I don't know. We're kind of just really open to seeing what comes our way.
I suppose it's a good way to look at it, and I say this to every young person that I ever come across, Carly, that life's your oyster. Like you can just the opportunity is out there. You've just, as you've said it to me, and it's just how badly you really want it. And I know that's a saying that you absolutely live by, and it's true. It's true in anything. It's true in business. It's true in fitness. It's true whatever it is. If you want to do it, you'll do it. If you don't, you don't. And that's been something that I've learned as well. And it's hard work. And but if you want to go and pursue your dreams, don't let anyone say you can't achieve them. And that's my biggest advice to anyone, whoever listens to this or in life. Don't let anyone say you can't achieve what you go out and set to do. Because, as I said to you off air, if I listened to the people who laughed at me when I said I was going to be a podcast host, I wouldn't be sitting here across from you and interacting with veterans, historians, and just doing what I love. And it's meeting people and trying to just impact people is what we're all here to do. So it's great advice. And I just want to thank you for coming on True Blue History and sharing your story. And all I can say is thank you for your service. And thank you for what you do for now new applicants going forward in defence, fireys, police, and just thank you for coming on True Blue History. Carly Box, it's been an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on True Blue History, so thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review for the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. And if you feel like supporting us, you can now via our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/True Blue History, or buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/True Blue History, and check out our new website, truebluehistory.com, for more great content.